NTT Communications.
Yeah, thank you very much. And having a gold medalist as next speaker behind me in running, I guess I better run fast, huh? Otherwise he overruns me. Okay, yes, we are an analyst company, we are a market research company, but we are also a consulting company. When we sold Meta Group, because most of our people, the pedigrees, Meta Group, Gardner, when we sold Meta Group, we started the Experton Group back in 2005. I'm one of the co-founders. I'm in charge of the international and global business. We decided instead of just having the market research and the analyst, we also extended a little bit more into the consulting to help the customer to execute the advice that we gave him. And this is also one of the reasons why we're here today, to give you a little bit of an idea about the reality of cloud. There's so much talk about cloud, but what is the real situation, with the companies, what can we really see? We work with them on a daily basis, so we have a very good feeling what is only smoke and dust and what is marketing hype and what is reality. Let's start with a quick overview on the vendor market landscape, because every year we do a big vendor benchmark where we compare all the suppliers. But just looking at the market by itself, we already have to divide that market, into a lot of different sectors. We see on the left-hand side the technology vendors, starting from the software, the platforms, the security, virtualization, all the way to the service, to the storage, the data center, the network of cars. And then, after the knowledge suppliers, we come to the cloud service providers, kind of their core when we talk about the cloud itself. It's software as a service, platform as a service, infrastructure as a service, and the infrastructure provider who kind of provide the co-location, the data centers, the network, like we have heard today from NTT, that they are providing there. And then, of course, we have the cloud integrators, when it comes to the planning, developing, the transformation and migration and so on. And then we have the user. So this is the whole ecosystem on the cloud there. And of course, every company today claims their cloud vendor. But it's not always easy to see where do they fit. What do they really provide? Do they really provide a cloud? Do they just provide a technology that you can use to build a cloud? What is it? So that's the reason why we are doing this vendor benchmark every year. And if you go to Google and you ask about cloud vendor, you are going to see the first 5, 6, 7 hits all from Experton Group on that study there. I know this is something very trivial and you all know it, but I'm still going to show it. There's going to be there are 4 deployment models, on the cloud. We have the private cloud, and a lot of IT people are talking about the private cloud. There's a good reason for that. We are going to talk about that as well. It's owned or leased, by a single organization. We know that. The main reason I'm showing this picture is not only because you see different clouds up there, some a little bit dark, like rain clouds, some a little bit more sunny and shiny, more marketing clouds, The main reason is community cloud, because most of people forget community cloud. A lot of people saying cloud is nothing for your business critical areas. It's for collaboration. It's for some other stuff, but not for business critical. So we talked to an airline, and the airline said, we are not doing anything on SOA. We kept talking, they said, we're not doing anything on cloud. We kept talking, they talked about the ERP system that they are using, big SAP user. And then we talked about airline reservation system. That's pretty much core to an airline, isn't it? Where does the airline reservation system run? Oh, that one runs in Erding by Amadeus. And it's not hosting, it's one application, 25 airlines, all the same feature function, one application. That's a community cloud. Very special network security demands for one community, airlines. So there's a lot of community clouds out there, and sometimes even the IT organization doesn't even know it. There's another example which is not a real community cloud because it is kind of for all companies. You know, it's the typical 360 HR performance review, which was around for the last 10 years. SuccessFactors. Okay? We've talked to many companies, you know, and they said, oh yeah, we are doing 360 performance review. And I said, where does it run in your data center? And then the IT boss, you know, started thinking, said, actually, it doesn't even run in our data center. It's a cloud offering. And as we have heard before from the speaker, when you start digging into your organization, you're going to see a lot of cloud stuff. But maybe not in IT, maybe outside of the IT. It might be travel management. You know, there's a lot of cloud solutions already out there. Community cloud is one of the most interesting ones because we're going to see a lot more around the community cloud. We, of course, know the next one, the public cloud, and when we start mixing them and matching them together, we're going to see the hybrid cloud. Now, let's continue. When we look at the infrastructure, we differentiate between shared and dedicated, and between unmanaged, self-service, and managed. Okay? So when we look down at the typical public cloud that's shared, it's a standardized SLA, you know, and this is pay-as-you-go for everyone. You know, Dropbox, you know. How do people get Dropbox? Do they go to the IT? Or do they put the $20 or the €20 on a travel claim? Simple. Why should I go to IT? Okay? That's the way it goes. We all know that. We all are a cloud user. The first cloud that we started using is actually our voicemail on our mobile phone. The biggest cloud solution. We had analog telephones at home. We had the answering box. It became digital, and the answering box disappeared. Who has still an answering box at home? It's a cloud solution. Where does your voice message reside? Which country? Which server? Which disk? No one cares. No one cares. Why should you? Okay? That's all cloud. And as we've heard from the digital natives, they live in the cloud anyway. Most of the people with anything from Apple, they live in the cloud. Whether it's iPhone, whether it's iPad. And of course, sometimes it's very tricky. Because if you are a doctor in a hospital, with your iPad, you go home, you connect to the Apple iCloud. Now the question is, where's your data? Where is the data for the Apple iCloud? Who knows? Where is it? Where's the data? At Apple's data center? No, it's not quite finished yet. Maybe at Amazon or maybe at Microsoft, one of them. Okay? So, we get into the cloud very easy. Our users, everyone, okay? So we have to live with it. When we look at the other areas, you know, we have the private cloud here, we have the managed private cloud, and we have the managed hosting. As you can see here from the statement, you know, the most of the enterprises, you know, they're looking for the managed area, and a lot of them, they also think, you know, this public cloud there, especially for niches and specialized usage, you know, which to a certain degree is true, you know, but still we have to have a strategy because the users, they will use them because it's so easy. They do it privately, you know. The user expectation has changed dramatically over the last 20 years, you know. We know what works in the consumer area, and we won't have the same in the enterprise, you know. And that's a challenge of the Chief Information Officer on providing a similar environment. Now, this is not an eye test for the people in the back, you know. This is now just a list that we compiled for the benchmark in Germany, okay? Just on the infrastructure as a service provider and the platform as a service, you know. And as you can see, and as we see every year, there's tons of new vendors coming, okay? So we analyzed just 48 vendors there, just in that sector there. And of course, that's a challenge for the IT organization. As we've heard, IT skills, knowledge, training, everything. That's not easy to keep up with, and choosing the right vendors is a challenge there, This is now looking at the different areas there, from middleware to the management, there are 38 more vendors, and then we have the integration and consulting, So all together, we had the 148 vendors there that we analyzed. Now when we look at the infrastructure as a service, the public offering there, we see the traditional main players that you would expect. From Amazon Web Services, especially for the application side, application developing, application testing, it's broadly used, not just by small companies, by large enterprises, throughout the whole market. Of course, offerings from IBM and Microsoft, Deutsche Telekom, So pretty much the standard companies that you would expect there, When we look at the managed cloud, now you see more the traditional IT players. A lot of those players, they have gained knowledge through managing service, through managed service offerings. They have grown into it, over the last years or even 10 years. You see like T-Systems, IBM. You see also in the leading area there, NTT, So there's actually a lot of telecommunication companies as well, because of their history and their experience around the networking and the managed service again, they're ideally positioned on also being a major player there, When you look at the infrastructure, technology side, the standard players that you would expect. One of the players who is positioning themselves very aggressively and did a very big jump in a very short time is Cisco. They went in there, with full force. Of course, IBM, HP, EMC, those are kind of the standard players in that area. But there's also a couple of new ones which are pretty interesting, to watch as they come along there. Because sometimes they also have a different approach into the new world. As many people say, you cannot solve new problems with old ideas. When we look at the management side, on the technology side, that you need VMware, of course, is well positioned there, Microsoft, and then a whole bunch also of new companies more on the left-hand quarter there, up there, with interesting new ideas and solution offerings there. What are the drivers and what are the roadblocks? When we look at the data centers around the world, and we see there's about 7,000 data centers, the utilization rate is 6%. That's very low, 6% utilization rate. That's the average. When you go and you ask the chief financial officer on buying an airplane because you do a couple of flights a year, you will go to utilize it by 6%, he would kick you out. Okay? So, of course, there's the interest on using it better. Virtualization did help, on increasing that. But still, utilization rate is low. The infrastructure itself accounts for 70% of the IT budget. That doesn't leave a lot of money for, what is everyone talking about? Innovation, agility, globalization, and so on. That doesn't leave a lot of money. It's just paid for the infrastructure there. And of course, we have a very strong growing use of all the web applications, all the web-based services, also coming all the mobility side, so there's a lot of drivers, for the growth there. One more is the TCO advantages. It goes a little bit in utilization rate as well, but one of the things that people have not really kind of analyzed yet when they talk about private clouds, when you have your own data center. And I'm not talking about a real small data center. I'm talking about a data center with like 10,000 servers. And you compare it to the mega data factories that some of the vendors are putting in. What do you think what the difference on cost is? How much more expensive you run your own private data center with only 10,000, 20,000 servers? We see a price difference of a factor 7 7 against the mega data centers. So the mega data centers are capable of offering certain specialized public services 7 times cheaper than you can build it yourself if they decide to do it. Of course, at the moment, if they don't have to, when you start comparing, like the mail systems, very often you see there's pretty much no big difference. Maybe the cost is not the main driver why you're doing the changeover, into the cloud. That's pricing politics and also protecting their own existing business, which for a lot of vendors is not easy on changing from selling licenses to selling software as a service. Okay? There's quite some challenges there. But over the long term, those mega data factories can provide, computing power 7 times cheaper, than everyone else can in his small data center. And I'm talking about 10,000, 20,000 servers. So usually not that small in Europe here. And then we have the cloud affinity. And I'm going to spend a little bit more time on cloud affinity because now we are coming to the roadblocks. Who is usually the roadblock on implementing cloud? Who is it? What do you think? When we look at infrastructure as a service, and then we look at the role and positions from the chief information officer all the way down to the IT architect, the data center manager, application portfolio manager, user infrastructure manager, to the portal, internet manager. We can very clearly see that around here, application portfolio manager, user infrastructure server, and data center manager, they are usually not very happy. The chief information officer, he likes it. He gets a lot more flexibility, agility, There's people out there, they do that for a living, for hundreds and thousands of companies, He has problems on the skill side, having the right people, running it, So usually the roadblock comes in from the people who are protecting their jobs. It's not very surprising. We're all human beings, okay? But it's not the business side. It's not the chief financial officer. It's usually not the chief information officer. No? It's usually the data center manager, infrastructure manager, application manager. Very similar all the way over here. Of course, it changes a little bit. Here, the biggest roadblock is the application portfolio manager. Okay? Because suddenly you get all the software as a service in. Now what's his role? The software development style will change dramatically in the next 7, 8 years to the year 2020. The way we will establish, build, compose application will be completely different. There will be a challenge again on the skill side, When we look at public, private, and hybrid cloud, again, we have the similar guys there, people there, like application, infrastructure, data center, who don't like the public. Not very much the hybrid. They're in favor of the private cloud. That's the reason why a lot of discussion is on the private cloud, because a lot of discussion happens with those IT people. When you go to the business people, there's a lot of other discussions. Very quick implementation for software as a service. Very fast, overnight, So that makes a big difference to whom you talk to, on finding the affinity, on supporting it, or the roadblockers who don't want to have it. Now, as a research company, of course, we also have to show some market figures and numbers so that we know where the future goes to, But the main reason I'm showing is not the big growth, not that the software as a service is the biggest area, not counting now technology there or counting integration. The reason I'm showing is this one here, this small piece here. It's called network. That's what a lot of people don't really see. Using a lot of cloud usually means you also better look at your network. And especially in certain regions. We are lucky here in Germany, we are lucky in most of the areas in Europe, but when you get to other regions, my home base is Dubai, I do a lot of business in Saudi. We have huge projects there, you know, like King Abdullah City, you know, a new city for 2 million people, you know, that's built there in the desert, you know. The network is the number one priority you have to have in place. Otherwise, there's no cloud, okay? And there will be some investment, so you have to invest there, you know. It could be from the security standpoint, could be from connectivity, could be from backup, it could be from just the speed, you know, and the data amount that you're going to move through. Now, we've talked about the internal cloud a little bit on the left-hand side. We have the external cloud, we have the private cloud, we have all the virtual clients, we move information, we virtualize, we have security, you know, and we have to make all this work, you know. And as we have heard also before, you're not just going to have one cloud. You're going to have a lot of software as a service solutions. You're going to have maybe some platform as a service. You're going to have some infrastructure services. Maybe your subsidiary in the States has different ones, you know. You're going to end up with a minimum of 20, 30 different cloud solutions, you know. How do you connect them together, you know? And we call it a cloud federation, you know. Federated cloud, also called the cloud federation, is the deployment and management of multiple external and internal cloud computing services to match the business needs. One of the important things we always have to keep in mind, the business needs there, you know. And the federation is the union of several smaller parts that perform a common action. We are going to see that more and more in the future. There will be different services available as cloud offering that we connect together, compose together to support the business process that we'd like to have. We're going to have better tools on the business process management side, maybe subject-based role, you know, emergent software development, you know, and then we're using the infrastructure which is available and offered, you know, on the market on providing the service function that we need for completing the overall business process, okay? So we're going to compose that and use all the underlying services. So we need the cloud federation, we need authentication, we need identity and access management, the connectivity, backup recovery, reporting and auditing, compliance, legal issues. We have to build that framework. That's the challenge for the IT organization. The way it should be, you know, that the IT organization has built a framework, and as soon as there's a request coming from the business, I need this software as a service solution, within 24 hours that icon is available there, like you're used to from like iPhone. You just drag it down and you're a user. Everything is in place, including the billing, okay? Building that infrastructure, of course, is not quite simple, as you can imagine. And the reason it's not quite simple is I used also as an example the company called Simplified, because they are offering exactly that kind of service. You know, they offer the service that you can now access all those clouds in the back, you know, whether it's something from Google or Salesforce, you know, whatever it is, you know, and you have kind of an automated environment that takes care that there's a single sign-on. Can you imagine the work you have when you have 20 software as a service solutions in the company and you're going to fire 100 people? You're going to lay off 100 people. 100 people are retiring. To make sure that the access stops for all of them, the payment stops for all of them. How do you manage that? The passwords. Where's the data for all those 20 software as a service solutions? How do you deal with that? That's where you need the support, either from a provider, and even the providers are using tools like Simplified. This is just as an example, you know, providing the single sign-on, you know, the logging for all the activity, you know. So those are the challenges that the companies are facing today. That's the reality. Reality is the cloud is already there. People are already using it. Reality is, as you dig into the IT organization, you find more roadblocks there than on the business side. But reality is also, it's quite a challenge on providing a professional environment, and having the right skills on doing that. You kind of, as a user, you go through the selector portal. The IDP does not stand for intrusion detection prevention. It doesn't stand for internet death penalty. It's the identifier provider. We as Experton Group have already been saying for the last 3-4 years, one of the top 10 priorities for the CIO is to establish a very good identity management. This is the reason. You have to have the identity management in place. Otherwise, there's no chance on managing it. So there's a couple of those infrastructure or management styles that you have to put in place so that you have the federated services and you have the applications down there that you don't have to change, that you can access in a secure environment. And you don't have to manage every single application, log in and sign on individually. That doesn't work anymore. I kind of like the statement that I read from, I guess, from our marketing expert here, especially, the reality is the world is made out of data centers, industrial estates, cables under the sea, code, lots of code created on a caffeine-fueled glowing screen. Yeah, still people, still a lot of different pieces, that we have to bring together there. And they have to fit, And that's the reason we did bring in this topic, the cloud architect, As we have seen, as what I've tried to explain to you is, one software as a service is very simple. You log on, you use. But having 1,000 people, having 10,000 users, and 20, 30 services, and interacting those services, that's getting pretty complicated. So you better start with a good architecture, having the architecture and the guidelines in place. Now we're going to talk a little bit about the architect. The overall observation recommendation is, the cloud architect has to make sure that this in-house environment and the external operation are effectively integrated. And that's usually not a technical challenge. It's usually a lot more about culture and governance, as we all know. Usually the technology can be fixed. You get the technology partner, you throw some money after it or whatever, but it's more about the culture and the governance. It's also important that the IT executives are not constrained by the business unit executives, kind of defining the environment they'd like to have the software working in, and therefore we see it as a very critical position that the Chief Information Officer puts a cloud architect in place. And we have heard a good example before, that this is really important on being able to manage in the future. We have seen there's many permutations to cloud computing, whether it's the internal or the external, or infrastructure or software, that we have to make working together. And one of the things we haven't really talked a lot about it, but actually the starting point is always the same. It's always the business requirements, like the growth, like the agility, like the cost pressure we are under it. And actually one of the biggest pressure that a lot of companies are nowadays coming to us is innovation. A lot of European players know they have to be very innovative on keeping their position on the global market. There are some other countries that can produce things cheaper. So what you have to do, you have to be more innovative there. So developing the business cases that demonstrates the value, that's also very important. It's very important that the architect there, and this is not just true for cloud architect, this is for all the IT architectural work, works very close together with the business, understands the business, and business knows what value they can get through a good architecture there. So here's a couple of those responsibilities, and I'm not going through into all of them. One of the important things, and this is one of the challenges, of the big challenges, why it's so difficult on having those cloud architects made readily made or copied. You cannot just get them out of a university. It's the leadership. That's something you have to learn over the years. We talk about culture and governance. That's experience. It's not just the knowledge that you gain in a classroom environment. So having those people will be key. Key for the vendors that you work together, key for yourself, depending on your size. But still, certain skills you have to have in-house. Very often we get asked, can we provide the full function? I said, no. We can coach, we can help, we can jumpstart, we can support, we can supplement, But you have to have part of that knowledge in-house, you have to develop it. It becomes ingrained in your culture there. It has to translate the company business strategy, advise the management, all the coordination with all the different groups, where it's a data center, security, application development, the business case analysis, and the training, mentoring. The design and implementation, that's very important, the analysis, where you want to go, your legacy environment. Don't forget, you still have a couple of challenges in the next years to come. All our ERP systems are very old legacy. They are, whether it's a SAP, whether it's an Oracle, those are old legacy stuff, that you still have to live with for quite some years, How are you going to implement it, Prioritization, all those areas are there, some of the tasks and the responsibility of the cloud architect, because we all know bad architecture you usually see when it's too late, and you don't want to end up, with something like this, where you see the pole has been placed in the wrong place, We all know it's cumbersome, it's painful, it's hard work on fixing the problems that you didn't fix at the beginning. The collaboration work is very important, the facilitation, the process improvement. We have heard before a couple of statements from the CIOs who were on the stage here. Process, Process is one of the key knowledge the IT organization must gain. Horizontal process improvement is the challenge of the organization, driven, by the IT organization. So you have to build that knowledge. You have to provide the right support, mentoring, and tools on being able to help the company, on streamlining, putting self-service in place, reinventing themselves, putting new models, new business models in place, So, as a summary, for some companies, it might be a quantum leap forward, having that architect. Some companies already might have an architectural group, so you might be able to train them, to build them up with the knowledge, to move in that role, You have to address both, the cloud and the data center architecture. Most of the companies will live with it for quite some time. Startups have a big advantage. They might not start with their own data center at all. They might not start with any legacy, but most of the companies that we deal with, they do have it, and you will have it for quite some time, so you have to bring that together, And of course, down at the bottom, it's very important, that the business IT executives understand and appreciate the role and empower the role of the architect. We know you have to have gatekeeping in place to empower the architect. There's a couple of those organizational areas, that you have to have in place on making sure it really works. So we talked about role and responsibility, You have to have the buy-in to make it work, But start now, don't wait too long, because this is something you have to have in place. You cannot stop cloud, The question is how you can take advantage of the cloud, how you can make sure that you use it securely, safely, and you turn it around and actually become the proactive supplier of the cloud solution to all your business organizations. And there's some great opportunities there how you can do that. But you have to take that possibility there, and run with it. For the CEO, there's a lot of challenges. We have a model how we go through with our clients from the cloud assessment, from the use case evaluation, all the way down to IT skills assessment, the cloud strategy deployment, from the strategy definition, all the way down to the federation concept, the cloud sourcing, where we help to put the right partners, into this whole program, and then the whole cloud transformation. Of course, most companies don't go through all the individual steps, Some are very quick on jumping into the cloud transformation. Some are stuck with number 1 and 2 and never do anything except analyzing, which is a little bit of a problem more in the Central European area there, Let's make sure that we have really identified that there's no problem. It might take another 2-3 years, to find one, but let's wait and see. We usually say, get started quickly. There's a couple of things you can start very quickly. If you want to have an account on Amazon for your developers, nothing really big, 10 gigabyte, something like that. You know how much it costs you? Zero, nothing. It's for free. There's a lot of stuff out there you can start playing with. And that's important for the IT organization. They have to start playing with this. They have to develop the skills. And then at the end, we do hear all about the cloud, but when we really look into the offering, sometimes there's not much cloud in the cloud offering. And that's the reason why we say, there's the Cloudiness assessment. We go through the 5 characteristics, how cloud is defined, the self-service, the broad access, the resource pooling, the rapid elasticity, and the measured service. The organization that says, I have my private cloud, my utilization rate is 12%, but at the month's end, when there's a peak, I cannot supply the performance, clearly doesn't have the rapid elasticity. You might build some burst out capabilities, into the public cloud, Some of the big offerings in the market, when we look, for example, on SAP, Business by Design, cloud offering, it's a physical server per company in the background. It's like a hosted. We still remember the slogan, there's not 2 SAP systems who look the same in the world, isn't it? Not a good starting point for cloud, if everyone looks different. But it's important that for the user, it acts like a cloud. No one can really jump to 100% from the beginning. We acknowledge that. The end user acknowledge that. And the supplier should acknowledge it as well. It's a journey. It's a journey to get there. We have to start, and that's important. We have to start mentally. We have to start from a cultural perspective, that we are willing to source some stuff, or maybe even outsource some stuff. We have seen one number today that I always like to quote. That's the 17% of the manufacturing depth of the automotive industry in Germany. So if a Volkswagen, if a BMW, a Audi, and a Porsche, a Mercedes, if they can source 83%, then I guess IT organization can source also 83%, isn't it? It's pretty much core to their business for their automotive companies. And they provide 17% themselves. So cloud is there, cloud is coming in full speed, so you better get prepared. This is the reality that we see in the market. And there's a couple of other cloud areas. I don't even want to jump into it. I just want to mention very briefly. We've talked mainly about enterprise IT. We have the consumer. We have the infrastructure for other areas, and we have mobile. For other areas means like energy management, smart grid, smart metering, all the machine-to-machine communication, also for the mobile area there. There's a lot more opportunities coming. Some of those machine-to-machine, they were expensive, they were difficult to build. Now there's infrastructures in place that you can just use. It's very easy, very quick. Of course, we are familiar more with the consumer area, and we have talked about the enterprise IT there. This brings me to my last slide. If there's some question, I'm happy to take some questions. Otherwise, we are pretty much on time, I think. And I'd like to thank you very much for your attention.
NTT Communications.